Welcome to the It's Been Said podcast. I'm your host, SAI Executive Director Lisa Remy. Today's conversation is a special one. We're joined by three Iowa superintendents, Greg Ebeling, Shawn Kreman, and Robert Scott, who will be retiring at the end of June 2026. Between them, they represent decades of service to students, staff, families, and communities across our state. The superintendent role has never been easy, but it has certainly changed over the years. Increased visibility, growing complexity, and heightened expectations have reshaped what it means to lead a school district. Today, we're taking time to pause and reflect. In this episode, we'll talk about how the superintendent role has evolved, lessons learned along the way, advice for those just stepping into the work, and what gives these leaders hope as they prepare for their next chapter. Thank you, Robert, Greg, and Shawn, for joining me today. And most importantly, thank you for your leadership and service you've given to Iowa schools. So let's start first by each of you giving a brief introduction, name, district that you work for. You can talk a little bit about the size of your districts. And Robert, we'll start with you.
Well, my name is Robert Scott. I am the superintendent of Burlington Community School District down here in Southeast Iowa. Our enrollment is very close to 3,000 students total. I've been here as superintendent as 4 years. I spent 20 years of my career in Davenport as an administrator and got to serve as associate superintendent level there. I've got looking forward to the retirement down the road.
Yeah, so I'm Greg Ebeling, superintendent at Pella. This is my 15th year being the superintendent at Pella, and my 25th year overall being a superintendent in general. Started fairly young. I was 32 years old when I got my first superintendency, moved from high school principal to superintendent in the same district. I really didn't expect to be a superintendent. Was the youngest superintendent in the state at that time. And so I was a youngster. I just remember all the people that were older than me now that have retired. And then there was a whole nother cycle of retirements. And so now I'm there. So enjoy being in Pella, and 35th year in education. So I'm kind of hitting that magic 35. I'm going to keep working, but just not as a school superintendent.
Awesome. And Shawn.
All right. Shawn Kreman, superintendent at West Lyon. Kind of opposite of what Robert said. I'm the furthest northwest district in Iowa. So we're about 9 miles from South Dakota and about 8 miles from Minnesota. So we're way up here in the corner. This is my 8th year here at West Lyon, and we have about 950 kids in our district. So quite a bit smaller than the other two superintendents. Really, other than that, I started my education in Southern California. I was out there for 3 years, and then I was in Missouri for 5, and the last 31 have been in Iowa.
Awesome. Well, again, welcome, you three. And I know how busy your roles are and days can be. So thank you for taking time to be on our podcast today. So let's start first with, when you think about your time as superintendent, what's one moment or accomplishment that best captures your leadership journey? Shawn, do you want to start?
Sure, I can. Definitely, it's been a journey and an experience overall as an educator, coach, and administrator. So I actually got started a little bit later in life as an administrator. I coached wrestling for several years, and I really didn't want to. I knew that, just from working with my high school principals over the year, I guess, just really didn't want to take away that time that I had with my family and my kids. So I got into administration a little bit later in life. But so each one of us has, as we know, a different experience in our life and in our journey. So I guess the biggest overall probably moment that would capture my best experience was actually passing our GEO bond issue in November of 2023, just with all the challenges we have in the state of Iowa, as we all know.
Mm-hmm. All right. Greg, how about you?
Yeah, that's a hard question for me when I think back on 25 years as a soup and 29 years as an administrator. So I actually only taught for 6 years. I was a math person, and so I'm kind of a numbers guy. And so, I like to think that is something around human resource. I'm sort of known for being a financial superintendent, and people like come to me about with lots of financial questions, but I actually care the most about hiring and about people development. So when I think about my time as a superintendent, I think the most rewarding things are when I see people that have been developed inside my system now take on leadership roles. And so I've had three administrators that are currently on my administrative team that each have now stepped into a principalship, and I quite frankly see some of them, having the skills to be a superintendent someday if they want to. So I think that's probably the most rewarding thing to me, to see people develop and grow and take on leadership roles and step into sometimes the hard things of leadership. And uh, so so that's probably what I care the most about and I'm most passionate about. And so, the numbers are always going to be there, and you always have to do the numbers. But seeing people grow and develop and step into those roles are very rewarding.
And Robert.
Yeah, I would say a couple things. Yeah, I'd say us passing our PEPL was a
Mhm.
big accomplishment for Burlington because it's going to allow them to build the auditorium they've never had here for some 50 years when they built the high school. They just didn't have that. So I feel really good about that. I've always felt good about my relationships with like labor management. Some people when I talk to them, oh, you got a labor management meeting, and I've always just enjoyed it. It's been a good way to talk with the staff and be able to work things out. And I didn't see it as like a hurdle for us, and so I've always felt good about the relationships I've built in that. But I think my top one would be early on. I must have been at some conference and I heard someone talk about getting more of a student voice. And I really reflected upon we don't really get student voice a lot in the schools. We hear from teachers and communities. So I established student voice group when I was a principal. Then when I became an associate superintendent, I had all of the schools in Davenport had to, at the high school level, had to have a student voice group. And then when I came to Burlington, I made all the schools have it. And we've had those students present here at our board meetings, even fourth graders, seventh graders. And so seeing that development of leadership, I think is something I really have been happy about. And I feel like that's going to follow on past me.
As I'm listening to all three of you, it just amplifies the diversity of the role as superintendent or as a leader, right? Whether it's at the building level, and you are just the day can look so very different in what you're working on and the hours that you work. So let's go to the next question. Greg, we'll start with you. So, how has the superintendent role changed in your perspective since you first stepped into it?
Hmm.
And what change has had the biggest impact on the work from your perspective?
There's certainly been a lot of changes in the last 25 years, and vastly different than when I started in 2001 as a soup. And I guess when I thought about that question, the rate of change I think keeps coming at us a little bit faster and faster, and sometimes that's given to us legislatively, sometimes federally, sometimes locally. Um, but one of the things that I think has made the biggest impact for me and having to navigate that change is developing a continuous improvement process within our school system. And so continuous improvement using kind of a CI model, that's actually more of a business model. It's used more in manufacturing and healthcare. But we have applied it to schools, and we actually manage the rate of change that our system kind of takes on. So we use a change management process, and that's probably the biggest thing that's changed is just managing the change, because the stacking effect for teachers and staff that happens when we're changing multiple things at once, and then kind of the overwhelm that comes with that when too many initiatives get stacked on top of each other for our staff. So that's been more and more necessary, as just even in the last 5 to 6 years, the rate of things that are changing. Some of the things are good change, some are not necessarily viewed as good things, but the reality is that we have to manage that. And so That's probably been the biggest thing that I've noticed is how much change is coming at us.
For sure. Robert or Shawn,
Yeah.
anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with that. I even think back to everything was much more site-based, years ago. And because of all these additional requirements and things, we've had to become more involved at the district level with the schools to provide consistency or reports or any of that. I think the funding, I look back to the funding from the standpoint of I was on the other side. I was the vice president of the union. So negotiating contracts, you were always talking about 4%, hoping to get to 4, 3.5, maybe 4.5. And now we don't talk about that at all, right? We don't talk about getting that kind of funding from the state, which just impacts all of us a lot. And so I think the lack of funding, it really impacts all of our decision making, right? Makes it much more for every penny. And I hope we get back to a point where we're more than 2% at some point.
The only thing I'll add is I think Greg kind of hit on it right at the beginning of his response was just the political pressures. I'll just call them for that. I just think that has been a big change especially for me in the last 5 to 6 years, just because again of our location a little bit. I feel that I've kind of developed a healthy relationship with both our House representative as well as our senator in Northwest Iowa, but it's also something before that time, and maybe it's a COVID reaction or something that came from COVID. But I think just that relationship has been a little bit closer, right or wrong, in the last several years, just because of we don't know a lot of time in our local districts what's coming from the state. So it's just trying to keep your mind solid enough where, hey, you can reach out to one of your representatives there or your senator and say, hey, what's coming down the pipeline, or can you give us a heads up as far as how it's going to impact our district? Because we know, changes are coming one way or another.
For sure. Those relationships have always been important, but even more so now. Yep, absolutely, Shawn. Shawn, let's start the next question with you. So, what's something about the superintendent role that people outside of the job and even aspiring superintendents often underestimate?
I just kind of wrote this down. I just said, to me personally, the one I will remember the most is the how important visibility and customer relationships are to your districts. Just because one of the things that I think we all do a good job of, and that's probably why we're in this position so long, is because we've developed those relationships with our stakeholders. I just remember back to the day that my first year on the job, first month of July when I was here, I just reached out to all of my 5 board members and just had them take me on a tour around their districts, because we all 5 board members are district representatives. So I just had them take me around the districts and kind of introduce me to business people, elevator people, people at the gas stations, people on their farm grounds and things like that, and just develop that relationship from the get-go. And it's paid really good dividends, for me over that time, just because now if you're out there and out and about and you stop by a gas station, you've generally had those connections with those folks there. And if it's just common, elevator talk, as we allude to a lot in our business, it's a little bit easier conversation to have with some of those people down the road than maybe what it would have been without developing those relationships early on.
For sure. How about Greg or Robert? Anything to add?
The thing that comes to my mind is that I think is underestimated about the superintendency is how important it is to do the right thing, even when the right thing is super hard to do. And there's an integrity piece that comes with the superintendency that obviously flows through the rest of your system. And sometimes there's situations that maybe even your legal counsel will go, well, it's a little borderline whether you can do that or not. But I think erring on the side of trying to do the right thing is like super important. And I think we can always kind of cower behind the legal to say, well, legally we can't do that. Well, okay, but is it the right thing to do? Because sometimes I think we have to buck that a little bit and just take that risk. So that's an important part of being a superintendent, setting that tone for your system.
Yeah, I think one of the things I reflect on if I was telling someone is the job is just, you thought you were busy as a principal, right? I think even being a head coach was good experience for me because it made me a little prepared of how public the job is. But none of those set you up to what it is to be the superintendent because you're always on. And so trying to find time to be able to be just with your family. I actually have created a word with all of my administrators. It's like crisis. If they text me the word crisis, then I'll step out of any meeting. But if not, I can really be with my family. And if I see, hey, call me later, then I can just stay with my family, stay engaged with them unless I see that. But yeah, we're just always on call, kind of like a doctor a little bit, right? Sometimes you just got to go.
Yeah, that is always on. You don't get to take that superintendent hat off, that's for sure. All right, Robert, we'll start with you on this question. So what was one of your most challenging moments as superintendent, and what did it teach you about leadership?
Well, I would say dealing with a tough board member, just the view a board member would have had about the way things are presented, and where we should be allocating and doing different things. And it just really wasn't around student first. And so really my focus as I try to be I think a good superintendent is I always think about students first when I'm making my decisions. And so navigating through, understanding they have different perspectives, but then always coming back to them of like, well, this is my recommendation because in showing how it benefits the kids. Even sometimes our decisions don't always benefit the staff because the students come first, right? And so weighing that out with a board member, but just understanding not to get upset or, emotional about the decision and be very much just like, here's my beliefs, here's where my core is. I believe in student first, and this is why I'm making the decision and staying with that.
Shawn or Greg, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean that's really good. The challenging moments as a superintendent come, I think, and of course that's where our leadership matters. And for me, I think that my most challenging time was like about a year stint where I had two staff members that on separate instances each had inappropriate relationship with a student. And both of those staff members had to be let go. And of course, that just erodes trust with your system, with the community, all those things. And so that it happened in twos. I'm glad it didn't happen in threes, but it was one of those things where you had to do the right thing, even if they were well-known, loved people, within the system. It was like, this isn't okay, and we have to deal with it. So those are the types of things that, again, integrity plays a high role in what you are as a superintendent and what how you lead then through that stuff. And so, we had to do the right thing, even though it was hard.
I just said, and I think we kind of got away from it, and which is a good thing. But I just referred to obviously dealing with COVID-19. We, generally staff, students, the impact that time has had for us. Again, I don't think we probably know the data from that yet. But what we always referred to as with our staff, what we're flying, we're flying a plane and we're still working on it because we never knew, what the right or wrong thing to do at that time. And thank goodness we have a great group of superintendents in Northwest Iowa that we had weekly meetings. Even when we were out of school, we still met on a weekly basis just to see what others were doing and if there was any great idea out there that, that we could all kind of use or kind of formulate a plan moving forward. So yeah, that was, I think for many of us, that was a very challenging time for all of us in education in general.
Mm-hmm. Boy, I feel like when I was sat in that superintendent seat during that time, I would agree with you, Shawn. That was one of the most challenging times. And the collaboration between superintendents, I think, across the state and in the regions just became even greater than it was because we needed to just learn from each other. That was a great example of working together, learning from each other.
We're pausing for a brief commercial break. We'll be right back to continue our conversation. Stick around.
This episode is brought to you by Just Right Reader. A critical component of a high-quality explicit phonics program is applying developing phonics skills in real connected text. Decodables give children opportunities to read successfully and independently from the moment they begin learning phonics. For beginning readers, experiencing the joy of reading success is highly motivating and accelerates achievement. To learn more, visit justrightreader.com.
And now, back to our conversation on leadership.
So, Shawn, what advice would you give to a first-year superintendent trying to find their footing today?
I guess my response to that was you've got to, we've all been through superintendents, administrative, conferences and things like that. I think the most important thing, and Robert alluded to it earlier, is you got to maintain that balance. And I think that the essential thing for me in this position now, I think even more so than when I was, much younger, was, we always heard that balance between life and work, and I think it's so much more important now as get older, that you still got to find that healthy balance. We know that, like we talked earlier, we're not going to be able to take those hats off at home sometimes, even though we probably have the right to, but we know we're still wearing it at night. But just to try to maintain that balance. And I think one of the other things that this question kind of brought up to me was how much more important I felt, as I get into my 60s now, that just the personal well-being, taking care of myself, getting up in the morning, working out and things like that, how much more now I feel it's more important than what it was when I was in my 30s and 40s, maybe so much.
I agree with that time. You've got to have the time, even if it's a mental time for you when you, like, I go to the Y, right? And I do a lot of times late at night or whatever, just because it kind of gives me a time to kind of refresh and do that. But I think the advice I would say is, like, we get caught up so much in this competitive world, right? We're competing. We need to be better than everybody else. And if I was going to tell somebody, try to be as good as you can in your district, but also have all your colleagues and share data and share ideas, and become more collaborative. One of the things I talked about is when you start always having some superintendent on speed dial that you call and say, hey, I think I'm doing this. What are your thoughts? I get calls like that. I call people like that. And so sometimes we get caught up in this competitive world where we just want to make sure that we don't share a lot of what we're doing, because maybe that's going to make us 1% better than somebody else. And I think to really survive in this role, you have to collaborate with your colleagues, your friends, and share information back and forth.
Yeah, that's really good. I was just thinking as they're both talking, to reach out to others, because it is sometimes lonely at the top. We are the buck stops here kind of people, because it's before it goes to the board, but we know we're the ones that, usually get the most upset people that land at our doorstep. And so, but reach out, use your resources, because, I think never have I ever reached out to somebody that hasn't been willing to help. And so create that network of people, go to conferences to find that network. People have their conference colleagues, they have people that they went through programs with, they have, all the things that the people at SAI, just all the different resources that we have, and use them, because people, it can be a lonely job. And I think you just need to have people that you can lean on, and sometimes you just laugh with, because I think that's important.
All right, Greg, we're going to start this next question with you. So, are there any leadership skills or dispositions that matter most now for superintendents compared to earlier in your career? What do you think?
Well, we certainly live in a divided world. And so we are seeing, whether it's social media divide us, or media in general divide us, or whatever. I think we can see divisions all the way from local divisions in even in our churches sometimes. All the different things that I think divide us, and politically we're so divided, of course. And so we just see that, being played out over and over again. And so to me, one of the things that's a disposition is that we need, as leaders, to be uniters. So how do we unite people within our schools, our systems, our communities? to actually bring people together to work together, sometimes respectfully disagree in the right way, and not be kind of that cancel culture mentality that, well, I don't agree with you, and so therefore I don't want to see you. I think when you can talk to people face to face and you can work through things, you can unite. And so we're just so divided in how we can do that as a leader, to operate more about not create more disunity, but actually create unity amongst people.
Yeah, I don't think you don't really have like a personal account in social media, right? Because if you're throwing something out there or even just liking something, you have to think about every action you have in a social media level about how people are going to view that and what all is entailed in that. I think social media has a lot to do with this job. Um, not just not just what we see in social media, but also for ourselves having a presence out there, right? And being able to share a video with the staff. If I do a 45-second clip with a video to my staff, they have a better chance they're going to watch that than they are the email that I send them. So if I want to really say thank you to them, that's an easy way to get it out. So there's pluses to do it, right? The social media, and then there's the other negative side. Like as we retire, our social media presence would probably get a little bit easier of what we want to be able to at least look at and like or forward to one of our friends because we're not worried how it's going to be perceived at our level.
So, Shawn, next question.
Yeah.
How have you approached building trust with boards, your staff, even the community? And then what guidance would you offer to new superintendents?
I kind of answered a little bit of this earlier, but yeah, just the first month on a job is just developing those relationship with the board members. And we all know that obviously there are bosses, and but I think it's got to be a mutual understanding and collaborative development there over time, just because we need to get to know those individuals as who they are and what they bring to our district too as well. And I was fortunate in my first. Well, I guess we just elected two new board members just this past fall, but I was fortunate that I had the same five for the whole time, and which is very probably unheard of now, now in these days. And I just felt, when I kind of developed the sense of kind of learning this through you and I, actually through the program at you and I, was come to board meetings with no surprises. So, and I think my board understands that if they have a question about anything going on in district operations, they need to just give me a phone call, or send me a text. Hey, Shawn, when you got a minute, reach out to me and because I have a question or a concern from a patron or whatever in our district. And I think once you develop that as a superintendent, I think then you move on. I just, my next thing would be develop that relationship with your administrative staff. And for right or wrong reasons, we had West Lyon had high school principal here for 27 years that retired two years ago, and our elementary principal was 23 years, retired last year. So, and I'm stepping out here after 39 years overall. So our district's definitely seen change in the last 3 years. But also, I think we've developed a really good administrative bond, and that was even with our past administrators that were here, because they're going to be the salesperson for your districts, and they go out and develop a relationship with their staff. Not that I don't too as well, but also they create those relationships with their students and their parents of the district. And I just think it's almost kind of a pyramid scheme where even though we're like Greg alluded to earlier, we're that the buck stops here type of people, but I think you've got to develop that firm foundation with your board and bring it from the bottom up, and I guess that sense of the mind that you want to develop a good solid foundation and build from that part forward.
Mm-hmm. Greg or Robert, anything to add on building trust?
The trust building, I think, starts with being accessible, which I think sometimes people can see the superintendent office as not accessible, but being accessible, making that, and that means sometimes being out in amongst the community, amongst the buildings, that we're not just like hunkered down in our office. And so being out there with people and then invite people to face-to-face conversations. Because, like, again, I think trust building happens. So whether someone has a question about something, someone's upset about something, and sometimes you can get those hot emails, or you can get those whatever it happens to be. Invite them to come, because more times than not, when you're dealing with people face to face, it is so much better. And that is just a trust builder, that they're like, okay, yep, I can really talk to this person. He sees me. He understands my situation. I may not be able to fix it, but at least being accessible, and that would be staff, it would be parents, it would be other community members, and that just makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think the couple of comments that were made, I agree with, like having that initial getting out and meet with as many service groups, your board, actually going to each building staff meeting, right, to just be in front of them. But when I try to do this almost 100% of the time, is if I get an email from a staff member, I I try to go to the building and actually see the person, because I don't get, a ton of them, but I just go to the building and I try to see them one-on-one and say, hey, I got your email. What time is a good time to talk to them? Already connecting with them about, is this a really big issue, or is this just, hey, an informative thing? Because you never know. Email can just mix things up. So I started doing that early on. Does it's time consuming? It is. It is, because I have to push things away and do more work at night, but that's paid off for me a lot, is that one-to-one, because you don't get to miss what an email actually says. They see my empathy. They see my face right in front of them talking to them. So that's paid off for me a lot.
Mhm. Robert, let's start this next question with you. So we know the superintendent role at times can be relentless. So what have you learned about sustaining yourself personally while leading a district? And you kind of talked a little bit about this in one of the other questions.
Yeah. I think you've got to come up with a routine to have your time, your family time, or your own personal wellness time. You find that, I think, in the day of a superintendent, I think it's okay to take an hour here or there to go to do something, whether I want to stop at the store and pick up two things in the middle of the day. And if I seen somebody at the store, I don't feel guilty about it, because I know I'm going to be at the music concert until 9 o'clock at night. But some of us need to give ourselves permission for that, right? Or just to be able to do things like that. And because you don't have the time after school, and your presence at those events at evenings pays off more mileage than you could ever know, right? And so I've given myself permission to run an errand, stop down at the post office or something, because I know the extent of hours I'm going to put in after the day, and I'm going to be available, because that's when parents are available. If everybody could come see me from 8 to 5, then that would be just great. But that's not the world we live in, right? And so, but just the wellness part, I make sure that I get to the why and work out. And then I do make sure, like for my family, unless it says that word on my phone, the crisis word, then I know that I'm just stay engaged with a dinner or something, and then I'll get back to them when I get back in the car.
I certainly, I liked Robert's answer. That's great. It's one of the things that I've thought about, and I've said kind of over and over again, if you've heard me talk about this, is to hold loosely to our jobs. Some of my friends, and I love them, but they get really tight-fisted about, I've got to be in this job, in this district, in this place, and they worry about every decision that they're making being a fatal error. And I think, for me, I learned this a lot of years ago, but the more loosely I hold on to the job, it frees me to actually make the best decisions I can make, and then not worry about every last little consequence. And I've always operated, if the Lord wants me somewhere else, He'll tell me, and I'll go. And I feel like it's okay to hold on loosely to the job, because if you do that, it just frees you to make good decisions, as opposed to, I'm so anxious about every decision I make. And sometimes jobs are the right fit for people, and sometimes they're not. I've been blessed to have a good fit in Pella, but every position in the state wouldn't have been a good fit for me, probably. So that's just, sometimes you're lucky to land somewhere it is a good fit. So, but that loose holding is important, because I've seen it just eat people up. They get so worried about, I've got to be in this place, my kids, my whatever reason, my spouse, my house, my whatever it is that holds me to a place. And it's like, doesn't have to be that way.
Mhm. Yeah. All right, Greg, let's start with you on this one. So as you look ahead, what concerns you most about the future of the superintendent role? And then what also gives you hope?
Um, I think what concerns me right now is that our stories are really not having a legislative impact. I think we went really hard in Pella on some mental health things, and we've used all the different angles of having our legislators come in, all the things that you could possibly do to make an impact there, and it's just really they stiff arm our stories. It's like, well, that's really not that big of a deal. Well, it really is, but and so that's a big concern for me. I think long term, it's that kind of this we know better mentality than you, than the educators that are actually in the classroom, in the space, doing the hard work with students, all those things. Um, and so that's a concern. I think what gives me hope is we still have lots of young people choosing in to be educators. We maybe don't have enough, but we still have people making that choice to be in that service area. And so I've got two kids. I got one daughter that's a teacher, and I've got a son that's at Iowa State going to be a band director. And they're still choosing in as young people. And then eventually they'll choose into probably some leadership roles and those types of things. So we still got people in that pipeline. And still, so even though I'm retiring, I'll have a dog in the fight for like my whole life. I'll probably die before I have a person that's not in education in my family. So that's rewarding to see that next generation kind of step forward, because regardless whether it's public, private, homeschool, we got a lot of kids to educate, and they're not going away. No, they're just not.
Any?
I agree with what Greg said. As I mentioned earlier, political presence and things like that obviously is impacting us. The one positive that I just add on to Greg a little bit is, like it or not, we're all going to see a change this November, because Kim Reynolds is stepping down. And with change, a lot of times is obviously hopefully some new ideas and new ventures in state of Iowa for education in general. So that's for me a promise. And also something with that, I've got grandkids now in public school districts in Iowa, and obviously I hope for them to have a great future too as well. And like Greg said, yeah, there are still people, regardless of political motives out there. We still got people that are going to universities and colleges to be educators, and maybe somewhere down the road, educational administrators too as well. So there is a hope for it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the Kirk Ferentz of the world, where coaches stay for a long time. I mean, even when I talk about that, we don't have that culture right now. People just expect, we'll just turn it over, right? How do we get rid of the person, right? And you need stability to be successful, right? Whether it's in a building or at the district level. And so our climate in the community is more not acceptable of that, right? It's more about well, let's just bring somebody else in. And so I think that hurts the young superintendents that are coming, right? Is to be able to understand, because if you can stay somewhere 7 years, I mean, that's considered a lifetime, right? Right now, currently. And that was just like a norm way back when. You were always going to be there that long. And so I think that's a big thing. I think you guys just said about the optimistic about teachers. I mean, I've got my son's a pharmacist, but my next two kids, my girls, are both teachers, and I love it. They went into teaching. I was excited about them going teaching because I think there's so much benefit there. There's so many opportunities. So yeah, I'm excited about the young teachers we have coming into our buildings that we've hired over the last 4 years. Have been so talented, right? So talented. Our universities are doing a great job of getting them ready, and even our current students, how much they volunteer. I mean, I don't remember that being the case 25 and 30 years ago, but boy, kids just volunteer so much for when you look at their resumes or the things that they're doing. And it's amazing to see the commitment they have.
All right, this last question, gentlemen, all three of you are going to get a chance to respond. So it doesn't matter who wants to start, but as you prepare to retire, what do you hope your legacy will be for your district? and for the profession in Iowa?
Well, I'll jump in. I hope that I've encouraged here and in Burlington is for people to continue to grow. And as you know, I've taken most of my leadership to SAI for those events for professional development. I think that we get caught in a world where we are, contained in the point where, hey, we're doing this down here. You need to branch out. And Greg said something about going to national conferences. I hope that my legacy is that we can't just grow our students. We have to grow our teachers. We have to grow our leaders and getting them out and about. And then I hope that I'm known for someone who is very collaborative, that listens to people, staff, community, students, and that I've built that. So that's ongoing as I step away.
I really, the only thing I want to kind of share, add on to what Robert just kind of said was, yeah, I just anywhere I've been over my 39 years, I always felt like I left the place in a better position than what it was when I got there, and that's something that I hope goes without saying that I think we all feel that we've done our time. We've, put in our effort. We've worn that hat for a long period of time, but I just hope that when we leave, that we feel that that place is a better place than what it was when we arrived. And it isn't all just us. We know that it's been a team approach, and I'm always one of the first. What I always try to point praise and direction of support for others other than myself, because we all know that we couldn't be in the positions we are without our loving spouses, our family that has supported us through the years, and obviously our staff and our students that have been along the ride with us. So just appreciate the time with you today too, Lisa, and both Robert and Greg. I appreciated his time, so thank you.
Shawn, I'm going to jump in one thing. I think when you say that, it's like a coach. We take the losses, right? But
Yeah.
then when the wins, we just share it out, and it's somebody
Yeah.
else's success,
Yeah.
right? And that comes from coaching, right?
Yeah,
That's about that. So
exactly.
it's a great quote you had there.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I would just say legacy is a weird thing for me to think about, because that's really not why I think any of us get into the business is to have a legacy. I would hope that the systems that I've put in place over the last 15 years in Pella serve the district well for a lot of years. All the different things that we've done, whether it's we did 2 different bond issues. We did lots of systemic type changes that I think have made an impact. But at the end of the day, I would just hope that people would remember that that Pella is a good place to send your kids, and that people enjoy the programs we have, that all those types of things. And if I've been a small part of that, I think that's been great. I'm hoping none of them will think that, well, now Greg's gone, so all that's going away. So because it won't. It won't. So it's so much bigger, and seeing people develop and carry that on, carry that forward. Good young administrators, young teachers, young coaches, people that keep programs, solid, and how we keep replacing them. So that's, I guess, and at the end of the day, we have to trust that that's going to move forward and continue and still be a good place for kids.
Lisa, can I jump one more thing that I
Yeah.
wanted to say, but for future superintendents, I would say when you're having a tough day, just get out into the building. And it doesn't mean you have to go sit in a classroom. Just literally just loop the hallways one time. It just makes you feel better about all the good things that you're accomplishing that you just don't see. And I know that's big for me, is just to be able to go to a building, walk through 15 minutes. I just feel more refreshed about why I'm doing things.
It's great advice.
This is going to sound weird, but I would encourage them to get their bus driver permit. I've been driving the last 3 years, like on and off, and the last 2 years I've had an after school route. Now I can't be there every time, but there's something about you just connect and realize this is what this is all about. And just seeing the kids come on the bus, greeting them, saying hi, and that's real. And so it keeps you connected with what's real in education.
Fun. All right. So as I wrap up today's conversation, I want to thank each of you, not only for sharing your reflections and wisdom with us today, but the leadership that you've provided throughout your careers. Truly, thank you. Sometimes it's thankless, but today it's a big thank you to all three of you for what you do. And then for those listening who are early in their superintendent journey or maybe considering stepping into the role, we hope this conversation serves as both guidance and encouragement. To our retiring superintendents, thank you again for your service, your steadiness, and your commitment to doing what's best for kids and your communities. I wish you all the best in the next chapter ahead. And I'm Lisa Remy, and thanks for listening to It's Been Said.